Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a highly detailed and, honestly, pretty provocative proposal that's designed to completely rewire India's industrial landscape. We're diving into a source document titled Establishing Village Industrial Estate. It asks a massive question. What if the key to a nation's wealth isn't just endlessly building bigger, more congested cities, but instead turning literally every single village into a globally competitive, high-value manufacturing powerhouse? It's an absolutely audacious idea, and it challenges all our fundamental assumptions about how economic growth works.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the urban-centric problem, look at decentralizing wealth to villages, and then the nuts and bolts of building the industrial estate itself. After that, we'll explore the spree economic model, project the nationwide impact and benefits, and finally, look at the political implementation. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the urban-centric problem. To really get this proposal, we have to start with the author's core premise. The modern economic system isn't just flawed, it's fundamentally broken for rural populations.
The document draws this incredibly striking parallel between British colonial imperialism and modern India's urban-centric industrialization. And yeah, the comparison is meant to be jarring. Think about it. Under colonial rule, Britain acted as the industrial core, hoarding the wealth and manufacturing the products, while treating the colonies as captive markets and suppliers of raw materials. Fast forward to today, and the author argues we're doing the exact same thing, just domestically. Cities act as the exclusive hubs of production. They're the new imperial core. Meanwhile, villages, they're treated as nothing more than labor reserves and captive consumer markets.
Because of this setup, the rural reality is frankly pretty bleak. According to the text, villages are currently left with only small-scale, low-tech cottage industries. They are totally disconnected from technological advancements, literally zero R&D or cutting-edge manufacturing. So what does this actually mean for a family living there? It forces economic migration. People are left with no choice but to pack up and leave home just to supply cheap labor to crowded urban hubs, while their own local economies stagnate. They end up stuck in this perpetual cycle of dependency on cities just to survive.
Which brings us to Section 2, decentralizing wealth to villages. The crucial question here is, how do we break this entrenched cycle of dependency? How do you actually flip a system that's been reinforced for centuries?
Well, the source text definitely doesn't mince words. It argues for a massive paradigm shift, stating that the current model must be dismantled entirely. The ultimate goal here is a system where villages aren't just passive consumers, but active producers of finished, high-value goods. So instead of a village relying on a city to buy a manufactured plastic bucket or electronics, the village itself manufactures and exports those products. The wealth generated stays local.
And that brings us to the proposed solution at the heart of this explainer, the village industrial estate. The author proposes establishing a massive 25-acre industrial hub in every single village. Crucially, this land would be owned and operated by the village Panchayat. That's the local government. The plots within it would be allotted to local self-help groups. Now, if you aren't familiar, self-help groups are community-based microfinancial committees made up of local residents. These groups would start and run the high-value manufacturing companies. We're talking about fundamentally transforming every village into an independent, globally competitive economic unit.
Moving on to Section 3, building the industrial estate. Let's look at the actual physical mechanics and see how this builds from the ground up. Because a theoretical idea is just that, an idea, until you pour concrete and lay the foundations. To make these villages globally competitive, the plan outlines some mandatory, hyper-modern infrastructure. And honestly, the sheer scale of this requirement for every single village is staggering. We are not talking about simple tin sheds here. The source specifies 24/7 water supply with dedicated treatment plants, proper sewage and effluent treatment facilities, highly reliable electricity backed up by solar and generators, and high-speed fiber-optic broadband internet. It requires completely changing the physical landscape to support serious business operations and global trade right from the rural heartland.
The proposal also lays out a really precise zoning strategy. Out of the 25 acres allocated per village, exactly 5 acres are dedicated to administration, HR, and common facilities. But the vast majority, 20 acres, is strictly designated for factory units, divided into individual 1-acre plots. This is an incredibly focused use of space, designed specifically to maximize pure industrial output and minimize any bureaucratic bloat.
So you might be wondering, how do villagers actually afford to start these factories? 1 lakh rupees. That is the proposed individual investment required to kickstart the financial model.
It's a very specific figure chosen to be accessible, yet substantial enough to create real equity and ownership for the locals.
The document maps out a really deliberate, accessible financial flow. It works like this. 10 local individuals pool their resources, investing 1 lakh rupees each, bringing the total to 10 lakhs. With this combined capital, they form a public limited company. From there, they are given full autonomy to select and manufacture their own high-value goods. And to sell them? The model relies on a district central market, giving every factory a dedicated physical shop for direct sales, alongside a comprehensive online portal for global reach, bypassing middlemen entirely. Plus, the government steps in to provide software, legal, and HR support for a nominal fee. That allows the villagers to focus entirely on engineering and direct-to-consumer marketing.
Next up is Section 4, the SPRE economic model. Now, this explainer isn't just about buildings and businesses. It is about fundamentally changing the psychology of the workforce. And honestly, this is where the source gets really fascinating.
The author outlines what's called the SPRE model, which illustrates the profound psychological progression that happens when individuals transition from struggling dependent workers to financially stable owners. First, you have salary stability that comes directly from factory ownership. This new foundation naturally leads to psychological confidence. Economic security fundamentally empowers people. Once they're confident, they enter a phase the author calls risk-taking. Basically, think of this as shifting out of mere survival mode and into an entrepreneurial mindset, taking calculated risks to expand and innovate. Finally, this culminates in true economic change, where wealth is decentralized across the rural landscape.
Think about how much a person's mindset shifts when they actually own their work, rather than just renting out their time for a meager wage. That shift is the absolute engine of this entire proposal. By owning their labor and their economic destiny, villagers break free from what the author describes as a discrimination-based society. They're no longer dependent on distant urban corporations. Shifting the societal mental makeup from being dependent, paid workers to dignified owners of rural industries, that's central to the whole vision.
Moving to Section 5, nationwide impact and benefits. Let's zoom out for a second and look at the macro-level impact if this were actually implemented across India. What happens to the national economy when you scale this 25-acre model up?
260,000. That massive figure right there represents the projected number of new product lines created if just 13,000 villages launch 20 factories each. Let's break that math down. If each village focuses on just 5 unique products, whether that's specialized textiles, electronic parts, or processed foods, that is 65,000 unique products entering the global market straight from rural India. The sheer scale of decentralized innovation proposed here is absolutely mind-boggling.
This is essentially framed as the author's ultimate pitch to lawmakers, highlighting a massive win-win scenario. From generating employment to radically reducing urban overcrowding, the intended ripple effects are huge. The government secures higher tax revenues from hundreds of thousands of new village businesses and gets a stronger domestic manufacturing base, vastly reducing reliance on imports. Meanwhile, citizens get stable, well-paying jobs right in their hometowns. This drastically cuts down on forced migration and ultimately leads to way more social and political stability. It's presented as a complete, holistic cure for deep-seated regional disparities.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the political implementation. We absolutely have to address the reality of how the author envisions turning this highly detailed theoretical framework into actual on-the-ground policy.
As the source document reveals, this isn't just an academic paper. It is an active political platform. The author is running for office as an MLA or MP specifically to implement this vision. And as part of the document, the author is actively soliciting grassroots campaign donations via Google Pay to fund the endeavor. So it's a very direct transition from economic theory right into real-world political action, making it clear that the ultimate goal is to legislate these village industrial estates into existence.
And that brings us to the end of our breakdown. We've explored the historical grievances, the infrastructural blueprints, the psychological models, and the political ambitions laid out in the text. It leaves us with a genuinely fascinating proposition to consider. Is shifting the engines of wealth from the city directly to the village the ultimate historic correction for equitable growth? Could this unprecedented level of decentralized industrialization actually be the true key to a completely self-reliant nation? It's a massive idea, and one that absolutely challenges the status quo of how we build our economies. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning how the world works.